Hello students, I am Gunjan Malik Manocha, Assistant Professor, Institute of Hotel and Tourism Management, Maharishi Dayanand University, Rohtak. Welcome to EPG Pathshala. We are studying the paper Managing Culture and Diversity, and today we will study the module Culture and Organizational Behavior. The learning outcomes of this chapter would be that by the end of this module, the students will be able to first understand the concept and relevance of behavior in organizations and organizational culture. They will get familiar with different behavior patterns in various cultures while understanding the organization. So let's start with introduction first. As often repeated, it is behavior which forms culture, and organizations are no different. Studies have proved that it is the national culture which precedes through different cultures and they are brought into the organization. Do organizations require to change the present culture? How necessary it is for the organizations to change the culture? How do employees react to it? Does the type of workforce or the leadership or the teamwork change the culture? Is that what will be seen in this chapter? Now, culture determines behavior. Culture influences employee behavior and impact of norms, values and beliefs. It varies across the countries. Individual behavior across the different cultures, it differs. Differs in what sense? It differs in motivation, it differs in rewards and it differs in managerial responses. Interpersonal behavior is as important as an individual behavior in determining the cultural behaviors which affect leadership, which affect team communication and also the negotiation. Culture influences behavior and its impact is much bigger and determines the type of business a society engages in. The cultural values of the society define the reason of the business and how it is organized. In certain cultures, the business firm is an extension of the family and family honor plays an important part, sometimes even more than the profits. Some cultures encourage people to conduct business on personal relationship, whereas in certain cultures or societies, personal relationships are not considered while doing businesses. So this is the variation in culture. Culture clusters and cultural sensitivity. Now, culture clusters help in identifying countries with similar cultures. Cultures based on language similarities, similar behaviors, values, social and the economic factors. Cultures are identified through cultural dimensions. Now, countries having similar norms, similar customs or similar languages and beliefs, they fall into cluster based on their dimensions. Countries that share cultural similarities, they form a cluster. Clusters may have differences, but their similarities are predominant. Now, there are more than 150 dimensions identified through various studies by prominent researchers like Shane Hofstede, Trompenaars, Cluckhorn and Strodbeck and many more. Important dimensions are power distance, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity and feminism, humane orientation, assertiveness, values, collectivism versus individualism, gender egalitarianism, beliefs and many such more dimensions. Business houses across the globe, they plan their strategies based on the culture clusters. Communication, media and television, they have ensured these cultures and cultural clusters have broken down and they have made culture adaptable. Cultural sensitivity is basically the empathy towards a culture. It is a sense of awareness and caring for the people from another culture. Now, this helps organizations to plan strategies and policies and to plan in specific international setting. Organizations train people to adapt to other cultures. Communication. Multi-local online strategy is about meeting global business objectives by tuning in to the cultural dynamics of their local markets. So think globally, interact locally. The new media age. Communication. Now, what is communication? The capability of a leader to effectively communicate across the cultural boundaries, it will determine the success of that international business transactions. Studies have found that 50 to 90% of the time goes into communication. So communication is very important. When a member of one culture sends a message to the member of another culture, the intercultural communication takes place. And when this communication is not properly understood, there is a doubt in communication. Now trust. Trust is also a very important and a key ingredient in communication, especially in the organizations having branches throughout the country. Culture differences when communicating. What are the cultural differences when we communicate? The picture displays like, why didn't he shake my hand? What now? Should I give him my card? She's a bit close. So these are the differences that may happen when we communicate with different cultures. Language skills. Language is considered to be the most important aspect of communication and also the reason for the cultural shock, and one of the important issues in selection of the candidates whether he or she have the ability to communicate. Now Dowling in 1999 mentioned that knowledge of the host country's language is also very important if you want to be successful in your international assignments, no matter what positions the expatriates take up. Non-verbal communication is also very important. Tropa in 2009 explained that non-verbal communication is much ahead of that conservative transfer of messages which are done for the lone purpose of communicating, but it also affects the form of unfolding. Communication type is utilized by communicators to modify their appearances. Non-verbal communication involves a mindful and hidden messages, where the senders are aware non-verbal communication sent is along with its general meaning for the receiver's understanding, also knowing well that the message received is done with the knowledge and consent of the sender. Now let's discuss the categories of non-verbal behavior. There are 4 categories of non-verbal behavior. The first is kinetic behavior, second is proxemics, third is object language, and fourth is the paralanguage. Kinetic behavior. It is difficult to communicate without using, your facial expressions or your gestures, your eye contacts. Gestures and expressions are different, or even they mean totally opposite things in different cultures. Our eyes speak more in cultural communication, and to decipher what it means requires a person well versed with the cultures of 2 countries planning business. Proxemics. Proxemics is the influence of space on communication, both individual as well as office layout or the office space. Different cultures have a different stay in space. Asian countries prefer open spaces in the office with all employees of the equal cadre in the same floor, whereas some countries require privacy of the space. The concept of cubicles, we can say, for each employee. Touching is an important aspect of body language, and shaking of hands, patting and stroking are some of the examples of touching while communicating. Objects. Communication is done with material artifacts like architecture, clothing, designs, or even cosmetics, which the visiting international executive should be aware of while striking a deal, as these will soothe the vibes of the countries. Paralanguage. Modulation, yawning, noise, laughing, and even silence is considered paralanguage. And if one is not able to decipher them properly, it can create bad vibes between the countries and the businesses. Time. Certain countries might strike deals during auspicious days, like time based on their calendar years, like especially countries like China, India and Brazil, which have a history to boast of, follow the time factor of communication. Monochronic culture and polychronic culture. Monochronic cultures like to do just one thing at a time. They value a certain orderliness and a sense of there being an appropriate time and place for everything. They do not value interruptions. They like to concentrate on the job at hand and they take time commitments very seriously. And the opposite of the same is polychronic cultures. Polychronic cultures like to do multitasks, wherein the culture typically has an open door, a ringing phone, meeting, all going on the same time. Though easily distracted, they also tend to manage interruptions as well as a willingness to change plans often and easily. People are their main concern and they have a tendency to build lifetime relationships. Issues such as promptness are firmly based on the relationship rather than the task and objectives, which are more like desirable outcomes than the must-dos. Now let's discuss a very important dimension of non-verbal communication, which is body language. The picture is displaying so many different types of body languages. Your body movements. It's what you say, don't say, that counts. The first is facial expressions. The face is a mirror of communications. As we can see, there are 6 different facial expressions in the slide. The first expression is displaying anger. The second face expression is showing joy. The third expression is showing surprise. Fourth is showing disgust. Fifth face expression is showing sadness. And the last face expression is showing fear. Now, gestures. Gestures is another aspect of non-verbal communication, which many a time creates a havoc if not understood properly. Hands used in communication is common in all the countries across the globe, and the movement may mean different things in different countries. We can see a lot of hand movements in this picture, which may have different meanings in different cultures. Non-verbal communication. People not only use verbal communication, but they also use non-verbal communication consciously or unconsciously to express their emotions. It is clear that non-verbal communications can be specific to a particular culture and they may not have the same meanings in other cultures. Non-verbal communication is not standardized in interpretation, but it is basically culturally prejudiced, and it is a test between the parties involved because of high propensity to be inaccurately interpreted, since the attracted interpretation and meaning to non-verbal communication is dependent on the culture and the practice of the receiver of the message and the environment of the communication action. Now, leadership and multicultural teams. Global leaders should expand their scope both tactically and cross-culturally and develop a supply model of leadership that be used anywhere, it can be locally or internationally. They should have the ability to recognize global market opportunities and have a vision for doing business globally. The global leaders should have a thorough knowledge of their capabilities, of their markets, of their subsidiaries, and they should also have understanding of how the local market is operating. Leaders in multicultural organizations, they work with people of different cultures and different countries. The same countries need necessarily not have same culture but can have a similar culture. Diversity is the blend of people and things, and inclusion is making this blend more effectively. Gregerson and Black suggested that companies and managers, they complete the 4 personal growth strategies through which they meet the needs of successful international leadership, which are as travel, teamwork, training and transfers. Emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is what is required of a good leader who has the following set of individual and social competencies, which include self-awareness, the ability to understand the emotions and moods of other people, and these leaders are self-confident. Self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to think before doing a deed, to control, or to have a high level of self-regulation like trustworthiness and openness to change. Motivation. Leaders with high level of commitment, drive to achieve, and the passion to do work and money is not the criteria. Empathy. High level of empathy indicates understanding the emotional makeup of other people and showing cross-cultural sensitivity and ability to retain the talent. Leadership and multicultural teams. And last but not the least important is the social skills is another component of emotional intelligence. These leaders have good social skills or the good networking skills. They can build a good rapport with their fellow workers and they are more persuasive and they have the ability to build and lead teams. Global leader behaviors and the certain traits, they will be influenced by the subordinates and the work settings. They are influenced by the national context. Now, national context is a mix of national culture, business culture and group structures, or we can say the social institutions. Now, let's discuss the three types or the three styles of leadership. First is transactional, second is transformational, and the third is transnational. Transactional leadership. Transactional leadership takes account of the association between the leaders and the followers as the kind of contract by showing potential reward for anticipated performance or the outcome. Transformational leadership. Transformational leadership can be learned and trained so that the leaders at all the levels can be trained to be charismatic. Transformational leaders understand the need to adapt and adapt to the needs and motives of the followers in order to initiate, develop and carry out the changes in the organizations. They are recognized as the change agents and they are good role models to empower the followers to meet higher standards. They are learned and trained and they are also charismatic. And the third type of leadership style is transnational. Transnational leaders, on the other hand, they increase traits like strategy, visualization of client focus, people expertise, outcome orientation, team, high integrity and flexibility, and develop themselves to be innovators. They work with diverse teams by acknowledging diversity and inclusion, being able to deal with differences amongst different customers, workforce, provider, and the stakeholders. When is transnational leadership feasible? Circumstances suited to transnational leadership. Then the decisions must be made quickly and without dissent. Only then transnational leadership is successful. Then the members have insufficient knowledge to contribute to decisions. Then the task involves safety risks and the leader is accountable. And the last is work is routine and without any scope for creativity or innovation. Transnational leadership traits. Transnational leadership is based on rewards and sanctions. The rewards may be cognitive reward or praise, and sanctions may be management by exception, which can be active as well as passive. A global leadership compromises the interaction of two sets of variables, the content and the context. The content aspect of leadership ascribes to the qualities of the leader and the decision making, whereas the context adheres to the entire unpredictability in a particular situation. Global leadership and organizational behavior effectiveness. The global leadership and organizational behavior effectiveness is a thorough study across the world of how each of the 62 societies in 10 regions of the world scores on 9 major dimensions of culture and 6 major behaviors of global leaders. The study was conducted by Robert House, a research program using around 170 social scientists and management scholars. They used both qualitative and quantitative data to find out universally accepted cultural and leadership behaviors. Now, this slide in a form of a diagram explains how the study of globe was conducted, the reality of the multiple complexities of the different regions, the different countries which fall in these regions. Globe researchers identified 6 global leadership behaviors. Number 1 is value, charismatic / value-based leadership. Second is participative leadership. Third is autonomous leadership. Fourth is team-oriented leadership. fifth is humane-oriented leadership, and the last is self-protective leadership. Now the slide which shows the global leaders, the reality again of the multiple complexities, cultural dimensions, high score clusters and low score clusters. If we talk about assertiveness and orientation, the Eastern Europe and the Germanic Europe, they fall on high score clusters, and Nordic Europe fall on a low score cluster in assertiveness orientation. If we talk about future orientation, Germanic Europe and Nordic Europe, both again on the high score, and on the low score are Eastern Europe, Latin America and Middle East. If we talk about gender, then the Eastern Europe and Nordic Europe on high score, Middle East on the low score. So same ways, there are many other cultural dimensions, and they have given a score of high score clusters of the countries and low score clusters. Now the global leaders, the reality of multiple complexities. As you can see in this slide, there are 6 global leadership behaviors, and we have assigned different colors to all the leadership behaviors. First is charismatic or value-based leadership. We have assigned a brown color for the same. For the team-oriented leadership, yellow color. Green color has been assigned to participative leadership style. Purple color has been assigned to humane-oriented leadership. Blue color has been assigned to autonomous leadership. And red has been assigned to self-protective leadership. Then there are different clusters which are shown in this diagram. And then we have showed their relative importance of these styles in different clusters. If we talk about the first cluster, which is Eastern Europe. So in Eastern Europe, the most important is autonomous leadership. The second importance is given to self-protective leadership. On the third falls the charismatic leadership. On the fourth, we have team-oriented leadership. On fifth, the importance is, very less importance has been given to humane-oriented leadership, and least important is participative style. So we can say the Eastern Europe cluster doesn't follow participative leadership style, have very less human-oriented leadership, and they are more inclined towards the autonomous style of leadership. Same ways has been given for Latin America, Latin Europe, Confucian Asia, Nordic Europe, Anglo, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southern Asia, Germanic Europe and Middle East. Other studies to find out the global leadership behaviors include those of Hofstede, who identified 5 dimensions: power distance, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity, femininity, individualism and long-term practices. Hare and Ghiselli and Potter, who surveyed more than 3,000 managers in 14 countries, found that delegation and participation, they made them less appreciated, and the willingness of the subordinates to take an active role in the management process. Convergence is the parallel of leadership styles resulting from a combination of cultures and business practices through international institutions. Convergence is the differences in management systems which have arisen as a result of the geographical isolation of the business and the consequent development of differing beliefs and the value orientations of national cultures. They are being superseded by the logic of technology and the markets, which requires the adoption of specific and therefore universally applicable management techniques. Global leadership thrives on convergent leadership, whereby accepting each culture as it is and accepting that cultural style and even the leadership style. The importance of international teams is given more importance as the reach of the organization's international market expands. To achieve the goals of their people and the organizations, there must be means to communicate a corporate culture, develop a global view, coordinate and integrate, and be also responsive to the local market. Transnational leaders enjoy the following traits. The first trait is strategic orientation, vision, client focus, good people skills, result orientation, team focus, strong moral compass, and high integrity and adaptability. Traits of transnational leaders. It starts from strategic orientation, They should have a vision, they should have a client focus, they should have good people skills, they should be result oriented, they should have team focus, they should have a very strong moral compass, and a high integrity and adaptability is also expected as a trait from transnational leaders. Technology and international business. Now, virtual teams interact through computer-mediated communication system, and they are linked together through time and space and even the international boundaries. Training techniques for virtual teams include shared knowledge across the business units and across the cultures, and the logistics of differences in time and space must be taken into consideration, the group diversity and the communication. The successful international teams and the managers deal with multicultural challenges. Those challenges are, the first one is adaptation, acknowledging the cultural gaps openly and working around them. The second is structural intervention, changing the shape and makeup of the team. The third is managerial intervention, setting norms early or bringing in a higher level manager. And the fourth is exit, removing a team member from other options have failed. Summary. Well, though working in international teams is exciting, cultural haphazard is harmful. It starts at communication, language, time zone, pronunciation of word varies from one country to another country, and a little difference can change the meaning of the sentence. Time zones impact the working of the employees if one has to sit long hours. Culturally too, it has an impact on the working of the individual when working on virtual projects. Well, when having face-to-face interaction, the non-verbal communication plays a very important role. Non-verbal communication communicates a lot more, even more than the verbal or the written communication. But this communication on the international front connotes various meanings, as the cultural body language is not same all the time. Delegates, leaders, they should have a fair understanding of the body language of the country they are having businesses with. Leadership and communication, they go hand in hand. Leadership is expecting to complete a particular mission, hence a good leader should be able to communicate in the culture of land, language, leadership style, respecting and mutual understanding, all the help the leader. Which style of leadership is to be followed also depends on the culture. Thank you.